Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Lizbeth Lozano, and you're watching The World Report. Today, we'll be discussing the lack of resources for veterans recovering from the effects of PTSD. This issue challenges our world's notions of justice and morality, as we often reject those who sacrifice their lives on our behalf. These people do so much to preserve our rights and our safety, but what are we doing for them in return? Mental health services are vital to help these retired soldiers come back from their distressing combat experiences. Yet staggering statistics and testimonies prove that these people aren't getting the care they deserve. What's that? This just in. We have a special guest joining us today, all the way from Portal, Georgia. Please welcome Chrissy Daniels. Don't be shy. Well, Ms. Daniels, thank you so much for taking time to be on this segment today. I just have a couple of questions for you. The producer just informed me that your ex-boyfriend, Caleb, served as a machine gunner in Afghanistan. Would you care to share more about him or yourself?
Of course. I'm a big fan of your show. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book Demon Camp, but it was actually written about Caleb's story, and it details his trauma these past few years. You know, you always hear different perspectives about PTSD and other mental illnesses, but the scope of the issue doesn't become real until it's right in front of you. I, for one, was not aware that over 1.7 million veterans received mental health services at the VA last year, but something that's even more shocking is that millions of others need treatment but don't receive it. When Caleb returned home from the war, he was a totally different person than when he left. He suffered from PTSD and survivor's guilt as he survived the crash that all his friends died in. He began to see his dead friends everywhere, and he would hear them talking to him. I would wake up in the middle of the night to him talking to Kip and watching the crash all over again. Also, he would always claim to see a demon he called the Black Thing that urged him to kill himself and always made him feel guilty for surviving. Every night, he claimed that it visited him and tried to kill him. He said that everywhere he went, he would hear it echoing in the back of his mind. "You killed them, Caleb. Why are you the one to be living?" The hallucinations and flashbacks became worse and worse to the point where I had to leave him. I realize now, though, that I should have stayed and supported him, but I didn't know what else to do.
That must have been very draining on your part. I'm so sorry.
I appreciate it, but it's important to know that after returning home from a traumatic experience such as war, thousands of veterans struggle to adjust to normal life again. And as I'm sure you can imagine, after losing close friends and loved ones in horrible ways, soldiers who return from war often feel guilty and alone, causing them to hallucinate dead friends to cope with the trauma. Going back to normal life after war with these thoughts can cause them to lose their sense of self, and hallucinations can take over their lives, making it hard for them to know what's real or not. I mean, that's what happened with Caleb. We must hear the stories of our veterans, resolve the problems of our veterans, and forever be supportive of our veterans so that they realize that they can count on us always.
Thank you so much for sharing, Chrissy. If you don't mind, we'd like to bring 2 more guests to join the discussion, and we'll get back to that right after this break. Please welcome another war veteran, Andy Kincaid, and his daughter, Haley. We're so glad to have you here, Haley, and you as well, Mr. Kincaid. Now, Haley, if you could, tell us how your life has been affected by your father's attitude after the war, and afterwards, Mr. Kincaid, the audience and I would love to hear your own personal anecdotes.
It's been hard responding to my father's sudden outbursts, especially when I was younger. But things have gotten better over the years. I remember growing up, Dad always had his moments, but we got through them, and now he's finally agreed to get help.
Could you describe exactly what you mean by moments?
It's sort of a sad story. After my dad returned from war, he quickly developed a dependence on drugs, particularly weed, which he got from Michael, his dealer. It affected his mood drastically and caused him to get angry at work and at home. The tolerance to the drugs affected his attacks, where he would spiral into flashbacks of exploding IEDs or incoming mortar rounds.
Yes, as Haley said, it was hard for a while as the memories kept on coming back, and it just made everything worse. And I'll admit, I let myself go. I started drinking a lot of alcohol, and the drugs really had a bad negative effect on me, but thanks to my close ones and Haley, I made my way through it eventually.
Do you think it would have helped to have earlier access to help right after the war? And Haley, what do you believe prevented your father from seeking help right away?
I think that it could have helped him earlier on, but he just wasn't able to talk about it then. Dad, you can talk more on this, but he totally detached from his recollection of the war and his presence in relationships. I don't know if he was at a point where he was ready to participate in group therapy or some other sort of help, as he just wasn't readily available.
I mean, you got to understand, it was such a low point in my life. There was one horrifying experience from the war that just kept on replaying in my mind. It was any other ordinary day riding in my troop's truck. I witnessed the death of Mariah, the driver and my friend. Her skin melted off her face and her arteries sprayed like high-pressure hoses. Her arms came off in my comrade's hands. Her face was completely blown off. I hope you understand why I would always lose connection with the present. I was always being transported to the past. It's hard to forget those episodic memories that have been the moment between life and death. I would always feel like I was reliving the same scene over and over again, and I would try desperately to avoid situations that reminded me of her.
Yes, and his friend Roy constantly asked me if he would ever see a counselor or a shrink, but my dad would always snap at me for mentioning it. And I knew he wouldn't go if I ever brought it up. He would yell at me, and he drank a lot. Until finally, one miraculous day, he got a phone call from the VA and agreed to go and receive some therapy. People who suffer from PTSD are honestly so scared of what they've seen and what they experience on a daily basis, and they're so scared to even get help if they really, really need it. I've been urging my dad to go for years, but it really just takes a push in the right direction. If there are any veterans who are scared to even try therapy or get help, it really is worth it in the long run.
Oh, well, that truly is a heartwarming story. After the advertisement, let's go on to our stats crew for some information on veterans.
Thank you. Statistics have shown that over 50% of the homeless population is made up of veterans. This is because veterans struggle to feel safe in many work environments and find it difficult to find a civilian job after rigorous training and fighting in the Army. Veterans often find themselves having flashbacks caused by loud noises and sudden events. Due to this inability to keep a steady job, veterans also find it difficult to form and maintain relationships, making it difficult for them to rediscover their place in society.
That reminds me of Mouse and Artie's father, Vladik. He was hard to get along with, and his wife Mala and Artie had trouble talking to him because he would become irritable and angry very easily. He believed no one could do anything right, and only he could fix things. Although he wasn't a war veteran, the time he spent being persecuted by the Nazis and in constant fear of what would happen to him in World War II was enough to give him PTSD and horrible flashbacks.
I'll now take you to Eric Niedzielski on the roof of the Davis residence.
Yes, the world is affected by veterans with PTSD, but I see it as more as the veterans being affected by the world. There are many stigmas around the disorder. Many people think the people suffering from it are insane, weak, or just delirious. Others believe the disorder isn't even real, and some people just do not want to deal with the people because it is too much work to live with their delusions and strange or possibly dangerous behavior. These stigmas further shun veterans and make them feel like they don't belong in this world, which may be why 50% of war veterans do not even seek treatment for their disorder and turn to suicide or drugs and alcohol, usually leading to overdose. And of the ones that do seek help, only half of them get minimally adequate treatment according to the Research and Development Cooperation Study.
We now see that veterans with PTSD are harmful to more people than just those who are close to them, but it seems as if they are most dangerous to themselves, especially those who do not have help or treatment. How could we go about changing this? Eric, don't be shy.
Well, I think that getting rid of the stigmas, first off, would be a great place to start. Removing myths and stereotypes and establishing facts around PTSD would help people understand the problem and how harmful it can become. Then, people close to those suffering veterans could learn how to work with them and help their loved ones. This wouldn't be as good as professional treatment, but it could help them feel supported and motivated to eventually seek professional help. These same friends and family could also listen to what was experienced in combat. In a book I reviewed a week ago, Night, Elie Wiesel and others became numb to killings and horrific events as their brains just shut down and stopped trying to process what was going on. This also happens in traumatic situations such as war, and if the former soldiers could take time to think about what happened, they would be able to relive these experiences, but slower, and finally be able to take a moment to process what went on in combat.
That's very relevant information, Eric, Jr. Thank you for joining us here today.
You're welcome.
Our guest today and many afflicted veteran families in our audience wanted me to share a couple of statistics about PTSD with you. First off, I'd like to share a message from Dr. Michelle Spoot, a clinical and research psychologist at the Minneapolis VA healthcare system. She says, about 30% of veterans with untreated PTSD take a more chronic course. It's one of those things that just cascades over time. You lose your job, your marriage falls apart, and it just accumulates. As we have seen previously today, our veterans deserve our support and our sympathy, yet we do not provide them with the adequate resources to recover from more. Often they have bad influences and resort to drugs or alcohol to try and evade their past memories, which only negatively affects themselves, their families, their community, and the world. Even more importantly now, one third of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans suffer from PTSD, traumatic brain injury, also known as TBI, or a combination of the two. The Veterans Administration reports that approximately 22 veterans die every day by suicide, and there are over 1,000 attempts each month. So there you have it, folks. If there is one thing you take away from today, I hope each of you realize the extensive impact that war has on our veterans. Many of you, including yourself, may be reluctant to help a homeless man or woman on the street, but know that he or she may have once been on the battlefield, fighting for your life and for mine. These retired soldiers are our blanket of hope for the future. Their message is so powerful, especially now, as many soldiers are returning from the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. It's time that we look at the larger story, at the veterans who go through many struggles in their daily life after war. It's time we be the Good Samaritans and reciprocate the love these people have shown throughout their entire lifetimes. It's time we take a stand for our retired soldiers once and for all. That's a wrap on our segment on PTSD. Thank you. That's where class is gonna laugh. Imagine Daniel. Do I laugh?
When Caleb
Stop. Okay.
Traumatized by the death of his comrades, including his best friend Kip.
I can literally just see his laugh.
What are you doing?
I am studying the lines. I'm trying not to look at you.
Yeah, literally, when you mess up, just do that.
Yeah, just start crying.
Yeah, you're gonna laugh.
I mean, you've got to understand, it was such a low point in my life. There is one horrifying experience from the war. Any other ordinary day,
my troops try.
but out of nowhere.
Riding in my what?
Okay.
I'm a worse writer.
A
horse rider.
Team and Senate finance. Can we stop it there and then start back here?
What? I remember growing more. He quickly developed a dependence on drugs, particularly weed. It affected his quickly developed
I tried to memorize my lines.
This is the hardest I've ever heard you say.
I'm doing it for the video.
You need to talk louder.
Me?
Yeah.
Getting into the drugs.
This is our last hit. Like, if you don't do it now, then you're never gonna do it again. Yeah. There? Charlie, literally, we need...
I got it.
Let's go up a little bit. Whoa! That was really crazy. Please stop. Just get through with it.
Let's raise Grayson's claws.
Okay, so very quickly, I just want to do a quick promo for the book that we're... Yeah, no, really do it. Okay. No, leave.
Well, you see, Liz.
Liz.
In a book I reviewed a week ago, Night by Ellie Weasel,